So, Gary Stevenson thinks that the rich should pay more tax. And I've got to say, with 1.3 million followers on YouTube, a lot of people agree with Gary. And so do I. I think the rich should pay more tax. But Gary, how are you going to do it? We've been crying about this forever. How do you get the rich to pay more tax? Because if you tax them too much, incentive, you know the story. Okay, so look, Gary, there is one tax which almost everybody has forgotten that is in fact means that most people in Britain are paying too much and the rich will definitely be paying more. And I'll tell you what it is. It's called council tax. Now, you're going to be shocked at this video because what you're going to find is that, in fact, the poor are paying the most and the rich are paying the least. Can that be right? I don't think it can be. Okay, look, how do the rich not pay tax? Well, it's easy, isn't it? If you're rich, you've got more money to invest, not in investing in British industry and making the country great or Europe great or the world great. You invest your money in the industry of not paying tax. And you do that by employing experts who will set up companies for you offshore or delicate structures within your accounting regime that means you can avoid tax. I tell you, there's one perfect example of this. Is the guy from Britain who paid his wife 1.3 billion as a dividend and she never paid any tax. How did that happen? She lived in Monaco. No tax in Monaco. So look, guys, you're never going to do it with income tax, but you can do it with council tax. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how everybody in Britain, no, I'm wrong, how most people in Britain will pay less, and the rich will pay more because what can't they do? Okay, we know the rich can move abroad, but what they can't do is take their house with them, okay? The house is the bit that we can tax and you're never going to be able to take it with you. Okay, well, let's go and see what we can find. Thanks. Before I get started, I need to tell you a few things about council tax which you may not know. First of all, what is it? Well, it's a council tax is supposed to be the tax that is raised on housing in Britain, that's domestic housing in Britain, and is used to finance local services, in theory, okay? Now, there are currently, as you can see, 317 councils in England, and they raise local taxes from approximately 23 million homes. Sorry, 25 million homes. And they're split into 8 value bands from A to H based on the value of property in 1991, and that's the trick. Okay. Now, you might imagine that the charge levied by 317 local councils in each band would be roughly the same. But if you think this, you'd be completely wrong, as you will discover. Okay, so let's move on a little bit and look at some statistics and data about prices of houses in Britain. Now, the average house price, as you can see, in 2025 is £292,000. Now, at this value, most properties in England fall into the council tax band D, okay, band D, which means that tax payable is on average £2,133. Now, what I'm suggesting is that we charge not the current system, which I will explain in a moment, but a 0.5% property tax. That's a property tax payable on the value of the average property would be £1,460, which would be £550 cheaper than the current rate they're paying. And that is true for everybody with a house value of around £400,000 or less. You'd be paying less, okay? You'd be paying less. But as I note here, the current rates vary from area to area. Okay, so let's move on a little bit now. For the sake of simplicity, I've given you this one here, which gives you the number of houses in each band, okay, and what the bands are. So 1991, remember, 1991. Band A encompassed all properties up to £40,000, B up to 52,000, C up to 68, D, E, F, G, and H. H is interesting because for H, it was all property valued at more than £320,000. Isn't this wonderful? So, if in 1991 you owned a £2 million property, £2 million, you didn't pay tax on 2 million. You paid as though it were £320,000. Why would this be? I got a funny feeling because the rich control everything, don't they? And they thought, well, hang on, we don't want to pay too much. Okay, so as you can see, 80.93 of all properties are in the lower band, with only 18.7% in the upper band. Okay, so far? Good. Well, let's move on a little bit more. Okay, so what have we got next? Look, I want to look at an area where the people are paying the most council tax in proportion to the money they're earning. And that place in Britain is in a place called Pendle. Now, Pendle it's north of Manchester, west of Leeds, if you know anything about Britain. And 43.2% of all the children living in this area are living in low-income families. Low-income families. Now, the tax in Band D, that's the average, remember, the tax that they pay in Band D is the highest proportion of income in the UK. The highest proportion of income in UK is paid by one of the poorest areas. This is magic, isn't it? Okay, so the council tax there they pay is 10.97% of their income because the average income is £23,100 and the tax in Band D is £2,535. Okay, well, maybe they're all the same, are they? Oh, no, they're not. Wait 1 second. Now let's look at the City of London. Now, for many people, even people in England don't realise what a city actually is. You've got London, which is our great big area. But within London, there are two small cities. One is the City of London, okay, and the other one is the City of Westminster. Now, it used to be that to be a city, you needed a cathedral, a very big church, okay? That's gone now, but nevertheless, the names remain. So the City of London, which we call, the business sector, the square mile with the Tower of London at the bottom. In the City of London, residents pay the lowest proportion of income tax at 2.1%. That's £1,274 in council tax Band D, but on an average income of £60,700. But as you can imagine, London, the City of London, has some of the most expensive property in the country. This is absurd, but never mind. Let's move on a little bit further. Okay, so what have we got now? Look, if it were only Pendle, if Pendle was a disaster, we could fix Pendle, but of course it's not. In fact, 10 of the low income earning areas in Britain where the median annual income is not more than £25,000, those top 10, or should I say bottom 10, are paying the highest proportion of council tax on their salaries. From Pendle, as I said, at 10.97, down to North Devon at 10.1. It's hard to believe that this is, but it is true. I know it's true because I looked it up. Okay, so let's look at a specific example. Now, Redcar. Redcar is one of our top or bottom, depending on which way you look at it, areas, okay? And there, they pay for Band D £2,407. And then let's compare it with the average in Britain. Well, the average is £2,171. Okay, so in Redcar, they're actually paying nearly £300 more than the average. But what about Wandsworth? Does anyone know Wandsworth? I know Wandsworth. Quite a nice area, southwest London. And look, the council tax raised in Band D is £990. 990. In Redcar, relatively poor Redcar, they're paying £1,500 a year more. Can this be right? I'm afraid it is. Okay, so look, the next question maybe we should ask is this. Why does Wandsworth charge so little? Okay, well, I haven't asked the council in Wandsworth, but I'm prepared to do that. But let's look at a standard answer. What do all these kind of wealthy boroughs say? But we are very careful with our money. We don't throw our money away like these poorer areas where they're not very good at looking after money. We really take care of our citizens and we look after their money as though it were our own. Very good. Do you believe that? But of course you don't, because within Wandsworth is the Battersea Power Station, which, if you're in Britain, you may know, the whole area is being redeveloped. Okay, well, not a bad idea. From a redundant coal-fired power station to a wonderful living experience, great idea. What makes the difference to Wandsworth? Well, could it be that Wandsworth Council got £200 million from the developer of Battersea Power Station as their kind of levy for letting them do it? Isn't that wonderful? They got 200 million. I bet Pendle would love £200 million. Okay, so you've got some idea of what's going on here. Now let's look at specific properties. And the first one I'd like to look at is a kind of standard property in the UK. A smaller standard property, a lot of them, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Is it a bathroom or is it a toilet or is it both? I don't know. The name changes. Okay, let's look at one of those. And here is one. Now, I've got to confess, I can't remember where this is in Britain, but it's somewhere in Britain. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 78 square metres. And let me point out that it is very rare for estate agents, when selling property, to actually say how big in square metres the property is. Because in Britain, we're conditioned to think of only bedrooms. How many bedrooms has it got? Okay. Well, look, that is on the market now for £190,000. Okay. Now, with the current council tax, they are paying in Band A, bottom band, £1,460. £1,460. But with a 0.5% property tax, that will be reduced to £950. So they'd be saving £510 a year. I bet you'd like to save £510 a year, wouldn't you? Well, if you're Mr. and Mrs. Average, as I am, not Mrs. of course, then you would be saving money on any property worth less than £400,000. Property tax would mean you pay less. Okay, less. So we've got some yardstick here of what we're measuring, right? Okay, let's move on a little and look at in comparison. In comparison. Let's look at this. Another 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom or toilet home in London. And the price, £920,000. And it's in council tax band F. Don't ask me why, because it's really small. Okay, but it's in Camden, and Camden Council have decided this is band F. And the charge that Camden levy on this property every year is £3,081.22 on a property valued at market price £920,000. Now, with a 0.5% property tax, they would be spending more than they are at the moment. They will be spending with the council, or rather paying to the council, £1,518.78. Okay, right. Let's move on a little bit further. Now, perhaps more typical of England is the traditional 3 or 4 bedroomed terraced house, okay, which was built, around the time of the First World War, maybe up until the Second World War and after Queen Victoria, let's put it like that. And here we have one, look. It's a terraced house with 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Do they mean bathrooms? Do they mean toilets? Who can say? And the current price is £400,000. Now, as I said, with the 0.5% property tax, they would be paying less. Currently, they're paying £2,675. But with a property tax of 0.5%, they'd be paying £2,000. So they'd be saving £675 a year. I'd like that, would you? Okay, but let's move on a little bit further and look at a problem. Look, just supposing the plot next door to our house was empty. In fact, there are 2 scenarios. One is that it's the garden. It's part of the land belonging to this house. Okay? Well, in that case, the £400,000 represents a slightly enhanced value over the other properties because it's got this huge plot next door, this garden. But let's say isn't. Let's say this is a separate plot. Maybe the house burnt down years ago. Maybe it was bombed in the war. I don't know. But it's empty. Now, if that's empty, it has a value, doesn't it? Of course it does. Because it's in an area where you could easily get planning permission to build another house. So I've got a kind of notional property value here of £100,000. Now, let's say it's worth £100,000 to a builder to build on, and I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's worth more, but let's say 100. That means that with a property tax, they'd actually be paying £500 a year in tax to the council. Now, why are they not building on that piece of land? Well, I'll tell you why. Because in Britain, there's such a shortage of housing that we have a thing called land inflation. Building land is increasing in price every year. It's often increasing more than the rate of inflation. What's the rate of inflation? I don't know, 2, 3, 4%. Land prices seem to be going up at least 5% a year, in some places a lot more. So if you own this land now and it's £100,000, next year it's going to be worth £105,000. You've made a you've made a saving. No, you haven't. You've made a return on your investment of £5,000. Okay, because you're a developer. Okay. £500 isn't much, but at least if you're charging £500, you are to some extent eroding this gain, this capital gain that the land is giving you for no work whatsoever. Okay, so maybe we need to look at taxing these kind of properties regularly to encourage people to build and not to hoard land. Okay, so let's look at another example of a property in the UK. And this time I want to look at this. This is out, what would we call it in Britain? If you're a Briton, if you're English, you call it's out in the sticks. In the sticks means out in the countryside, okay? Look, the price is £1.1 million. It's got 5 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, toilets, whatever. And the current council tax being paid is £3,650. But with a 0.5% property tax, that would increase to £5,500. So you'd be paying £1,850 more. Okay, well, if you've got a £1.1 million property, maybe you can afford that extra almost £2,000 a year. Why not? Okay, but now let's look at another property, which is kind of my favourite, I've got to say. Look at this. 7 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and I guess that means bathrooms with toilets because they're probably en suites, okay? The price is £21,100,000. Yet incredibly, they're only paying council tax of £4,266. Only £4,000 on a £21 million property. Okay, with a property tax, they'd be paying £1,045,000 more every year. I've got a feeling they can afford it because I happen to know they had put a swimming pool in the basement. That must have cost a couple of £100,000, mustn't it? I don't know. Never mind. More probably. Okay, let's move on a little bit further. Another property. Now this is a kind of weird one. Look, again, out in the sticks, price £1,250,000. This time 3 bedrooms, 2 bathroom, toilet, whatever. Now the council tax being paid at the moment is £3,162. So it's not in the top bracket. But why? Okay, are we charging property tax on the number of bedrooms? Well, maybe the guy who owns this likes really big bedrooms, you know? So why are we charging on the size of bedrooms? Maybe he could get away with having smaller bedrooms. There'd be 6 of them. Does that mean he'd be in the top brand of tax? Who can say? Mystery to me. Okay, now with a 0.5% property tax, that means that they would be paying £5,750 a year instead of £3,162. They'd be paying more. Okay, fair enough. Now, before I close, I've got to confess here. This is an incredibly complicated topic. There is a whole economic theory which says that the only tax, capital gains tax, income tax, all taxes should be abolished and replaced with a land value tax. But for me, this is a nightmare, okay? I can see this is a big job. Maybe great, but a big job. But here is one reform we could make now on council tax on residential property. Council tax on residential property was established in 1991 and everybody agrees it is a complete disaster. I mean, if you build a property today, they look at it and say, what was this worth in 1991? Wait a minute, didn't exist in 1991. Not the point. They pick a number and that's what you pay in council tax. Of course you can appeal. Of course you can appeal. I don't know if you do. I don't know how many people appeal. Maybe I could work that out. But anyway, look, I know this is a complicated issue. I know that we need to start working to make improvements to things that are so radically wrong, where the poorer north of England is paying more in council tax for their services than the people in London. This is, I don't know what to say here, guys. It seems to me that London has sucked the money out of the north because, let's face it, Britain's wealth was built on coal and steel and shipbuilding, you know, and all that's gone. All that money, all those profits got sucked to London and we've kind of left the north alone. Well, it's time for a change. It's time to build a fair and transparent society within England so that everyone can understand exactly what's going on. So, follow me on this. I'm prepared to do more. Give me your questions and I will happily try to answer them. And I would like you to join me in trying to figure out what the pitfalls of this would be and how we could implement it, because it's political. And if you are paying council tax, whether you like it or not, you have to be political. Thank you.